The Last House at Bridge River is a book about the indigenous experience during the Canadian fur trade period. Um, it was the rare opportunity to study and learn about how an indigenous group kind of coped with this sort of changing world around them. And it was we did it by developing a partnership between the University of Montana and Hoiston, the Bridge River Indian Band, which is one of the bands of the Statliam Nation. And we had this great opportunity to work on this project at a place called House Pit 54 at the Bridge River site. The Bridge River site is a big village of 80 houses. It goes almost 2,000 years old. And this one house was lived in across 17 floors, or about 17 generations, 16 of which predate 1,000 years ago. But it was reoccupied in the mid-19th century. And so there's this astounding record of these people's experience during probably the 1850s CE. And so the archaeology of it led to a number of findings. First of all, we were able to sort of nail down the spatial sort of structure of life on the house floor, the central hearth, the storage features, places where we thought benches and platforms for sleeping were located. We found an extraordinary quantity of artifacts. There were 12,000 stone artifacts, 8,000 animal bones, and 51 European trade goods. One of those trade items was a bead made in Venice, first made in 1851, and assuming it took at least a year to get to British Columbia in the mid-19th century, that dates that occupation to at least 1852. So some other aspects of interest, there were 250 or so hide scrapers, over 130 arrow points, and this large deer bone assemblage, and also this sort of kidney-shaped pile of burned rock on the floor of the house, all of which allowed us to make the argument that this house not only was a dwelling for probably two families, but it was kind of also a deer products factory. They were mass producing hides, and which is interesting because by the 1850s, the fur trade was still there, but it had changed from a beaver pelt focus to a deer hide focus. And so here's direct archaeological evidence that these guys are participating in the fur trade, but this modified fur trade focused on deer hides, not on beaver pelts. And so we learned that. And so we have this picture of this indigenous group who are making the best of the world around them, this changing milieu they find themselves in, while also maintaining their traditional practices and traditional technologies and foodways, et cetera. And I think it's important to make that case, to make that argument. And one last thing, so often when you hear about fur trade archaeology, it's the archaeology of the fur traders themselves, the Europeans, Euro-Canadians, Euro-Americans. And there really is this other story behind the fur trade. And this is the indigenous experience of the fur trade. And so the Last House at Bridge River gives us this great chance to learn something about how an indigenous group participated and maybe to some degree even resisted aspects of this encroaching fur trade world around them. So I hope you enjoy the book.